Using a 19mm socket, go ahead and remove your lug nuts. With the lug nuts removed, we'll go ahead and remove the wheel, set that aside. On the bottom clevis fork here to the lower control arm, there's a 17mm bolt with a 17mm nut. Just go ahead and remove the nut from the bolt using a wrench and socket. Go ahead and work that bolt out. With our lower clevis fork bolt removed, we will now want to go ahead and disconnect our sway bar end link from the lower control arm. So we're just going to use our pry bar just to work our strut out of the way, our clevis fork out of the way. We can use an Allen wrench inside here and our wrench on the outside and separate this unit. With our clevis fork pushed out of the way, we're going to use a 14mm wrench and loosen this nut on our sway bar end link. I'm going to use our pliers and remove our cotter pin that's securing our lower control arm ball joint here. You will have to replace these cotter pins. Using a 17mm socket, remove your lower nut here. Using our 19mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove the front control arm bolt. Right behind this flap right here, there is a 19mm nut. Go ahead and remove the bolt while we hold the nut. Work that bolt out, reach up, pull that nut out, set it aside. Now on the rearward bolt for the control arm, it's a 17mm. We're going to use a 17mm socket and ratchet and a 17mm wrench. Let's go ahead and remove this. You know, the vehicle's supported on jack stands. You can go ahead, use a block of wood or something underneath your jack, but we're gonna go ahead and raise up our knuckle here. This is gonna allow us a little bit more room to manipulate that lower control arm. On the back side where the nut is, I want to go ahead and remove the washer that is on that bolt. I'm just going to try and spin this bolt back and forth and push on it from the other side to get that bolt to work its way out. You might get to a point where you can work that control arm and saw that bolt out like so. At this point, we'll go ahead and try and work the control arm out. and work our control arm up and into place. With the control arm set in this preliminary setting, we're going to go ahead and lower our knuckle down. We're going to put our ball joint through it. We're going to put our nut on, and then we're going to re-jack it up in a position and then get our bolts anchored. Let's reposition our jack here. Let's put this underneath the control arm. We'll spin that back up. It's going to help us get that ball joint nut installed. Now get our control arm to line up. I'm going to go ahead and get our bolt pushed up and in. Install our washer and nut back on top. And we're just going to thread that nut down as far as we can. Not going to tighten it down yet. We still want to have the flexibility of the hardware and the bolt and the control arm without having it anchored down tight. So now we're in place here. Let's go ahead and focus on the back bolt. Go ahead and get our pry bar in here, and you see we have some adjustability here. Let's go ahead and start to lower our jack on that control arm. It's going to naturally bring this arm down. Once we have that close, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of work this around a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and snug down the control arm bolts here. I'm gonna go ahead and snug down our lower ball joint nut here. We're going to torque down our lower ball joint nut to 60 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and torque this forward bolt to 76 foot-pounds. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and adjust our control arm to the point where we can get our clevis fork installed here. Install our bolt in. Install our nut. We'll snug that down and we'll go ahead and get that torqued into place. I'm going to torque down our clevis bolt to 47 foot-pounds. With our clevis fork bolted and our front control arm bolted in, we're going to go ahead and use our jack. And what we want to do is we want to lift our suspension. We want to compress this unit here so that the vehicle is in its natural compressed suspension ride height. We don't want to lift the vehicle off of the jack stands. We just want to go ahead and compress this before we torque our pivot bolt in the back. So slowly jack this up. I'm going to go ahead and torque these down to 47 foot-pounds. Now that that's torqued, we can go ahead and slowly lower our suspension down. Go ahead and move our jack unit here. And grab our sway bar, line this up. Reinstall that and get our nut installed. And go ahead and tighten that down to 33 foot-pounds if you have the ability to do so. I'm going to snug down our axle or spindle nut here. Let's go ahead and install your wheel. Get our lug nuts all started by hand first, and then we'll snug those down. We're going to torque our lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds.